I have a friend in Chicago that's a baseball fan like I am, though we cheer for rival teams. And usually, he makes a trip down to where I live in Houston about once a year, and he takes me to see a baseball game. So, I got a call late October of this past year because my team was still playing in late October this past year. And he said, I'm going to be in town that first weekend in November, and I want to take you to a baseball game. Now, if you're not a baseball fan, that may not register why that's significant. But the first Saturday in November, folks, was Game 6 of the World Series, which meant he was offering to take me to see my team play in what proved to be the winning game of the World Series. I know if you're not a baseball fan, you're thinking, big deal. This was a big deal, okay? This was huge for me. I will tell you that I don't ever think I've experienced a sports moment like that moment, the final out of the World Series last year, in the stadium of the team that won. I wanted y'all to get the whole experience, so I put that on the slide for you, okay? I'll tell you, folks, that stadium has a roof, but when the crowd cheered with that last out, I thought the roof was going to come right off. I literally could not hear. My ears were ringing for 3 days after that was over. And all around me, random people just started hugging each other. I want you to know I didn't participate in that. I kind of looked around and thought it was odd. These people, my son was with me. Even he was hugging some random guy next to me that he did not even know. He was hugging him. Everybody was really, really excited. And then after the trophy presentation and all of that, we left the stadium and the party just spilled into the streets. I mean, people were coming out of their houses. The traffic was all clogged up. And it was Saturday night. So you know what I'm thinking. Listen, I got to preach tomorrow. I wasn't sure I was going to get out of the city of Houston that night. It was really, really a cool moment. I tell you, because this is kind of what happens to preachers. I remember, as all that was going down, just kind of pausing for a moment and just scanning that whole stadium. I just kind of looked all the way around and watched all these people on their feet, so excited and passionate about what they had just witnessed. And I started thinking about all of us. And I started thinking about this thing that we all do together, this team that we are part of, and this game that we are in, this mission that we are caught up in. And I got to thinking about our passion for the work we have to do. Now listen, I didn't drive all the way up here to Bowling Green to make you feel guilty, okay? If you got a team you're cheering for in the NCAA tournament, more power to you. Don't skip Monday night or whenever they're playing. I don't follow basketball, okay? But don't miss because of that. But I'm okay with you cheering for your team. Or if it isn't sports, whatever your passion is, listen, have your passion. In fact, what I'd like to say about this is that I think we all know that comparatively speaking, baseball and the work of the Lord don't even belong in the same sentence, right? We should feel awkward comparing the two. So I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. But I tell you, I did look around that stadium and see how excited all those people were. And I pondered my own passion for this thing we do together. And I will tell you, I had to think about that. And I bring it up because I want to stir you up and ask you to think about it with me too. There are some hard questions there that I think disciples need to wrestle with. Hard questions like, do I care about this thing that we do together like I care about my favorite sports team? Do I care about the outcome of our efforts together like I care about the outcome of Game 6 of the World Series or how the Final Four game comes out? And do kingdom labors stir up my passion and excitement and my disappointment like the World Series or the Super Bowl or the NCAA tournament? In fact, I've even wondered if perhaps there aren't some lessons for all of us to learn from sports fans about our mission, about this thing we do together. So the truth is, like happens to us that preach, after that Saturday night, this kind of stirred in my mind a little bit. And I put together a few thoughts about that. And I want to share them with you. 3 things I think God's people can learn from sports fans. When you think about this, one of the lessons I thought about was that sports fans teach us that we need to have the courage to wear the colors. When you think about that, we need to have the courage to wear the colors. At that Game 6 of the World Series, there was a Phillies fan sitting right behind me. If you're not a baseball person, the Astros were playing the Phillies in the World Series, okay? And so one of the enemy was right behind me in the stadium. And I know he was the enemy, not just because he was cheering at the wrong times. He was. But I knew it was the enemy because he had on this white shirt with red stripes on it that said Phillies across the front. He was wearing the wrong jersey right there in the middle of Minute Maid Park. He was wearing the colors into enemy territory, right? In fact, it was interesting. Somebody brought their kid to one of these games. And you can see he's wearing the Philly shirt too. This little kid actually got into it with one of the Astro fans while he was there at the game. But you can see he's there at the park too with his jersey on, wearing the colors into enemy territory. I can't gripe about that because I've done the same thing. If you're a college football fan, let me tell you, one time I went to Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa and I was wearing Florida Gator gear, and I thought I needed security to get in and out of the place, okay? Because those Alabama folks are serious about their football, okay? And I know some baseball fans, some Astro fans that have gone up to Yankee Stadium. Now, that's really taking your life in your hands, folks. They've gone to Yankee Stadium, and amid those sea of blue and white and pinstripes, they had on the orange and blue of the Astros. And you know, they did that in spite of the fact that they knew that choice would meet with disapproval. That Phillies fan behind us, listen, as that game went on, we started giving him a hard time a little bit, all in good fun. But he knew he was in enemy territory. And it's always not always so friendly. You've surely seen the news reports from time to time of altercations, even acts of violence that happen between competing fans wearing the colors in the wrong stadium. But here's the thing. We do that because we want people to know which team we're on, right? When I went to Tuscaloosa wearing my Gator gear, I wanted them to know I was not saying Roll Tide with me. So here's a tough question. Do we want people to know which side we're on? As we make our way out into an increasingly hostile world, as you guys go off to school around people who are very different in their thinking than you are, do we want people to know which side we're on? Are we willing to wear the colors? You know, the Lord calls us to do that. Going back to the class this morning, he forms us, Matthew 5, the Beatitudes, he forms us into the image of his Son and then wants us to go out and wear that. Think about Paul's words to the Galatians. This is Galatians 3 and verse 27. For all of you who were baptized in Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ. And to the Colossians in chapter 3 and verse 12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly beloved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. And so to the Galatians, he says, clothe yourselves with Christ. And to the Colossians, he tells us a little bit of what that looks like. But dressing that way will cause us to be seen. If you look at Matthew chapter 5, go back to that. We talked about that in class. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 13, after describing who we are, how we're clothed, Jesus would say, you're the salt of the earth when you dress this way. And in verse 14, you are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do men light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all that are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. It is God's plan that we wear the colors. He wants us to be noticed like Astro Orange in a sea of Yankee blue. He wants people to see who we are. The problem with dressing that way is exactly the same problem with wearing your team's gear into the enemy stadium. Going out into the world and being the people God wants us to be will not always meet with the approval of our culture. And I think, brothers and sisters, more and more as culture grows hostile to Christianity, it gets more and more difficult to do that. Maybe some of you heard the stories. You follow baseball, heard the story last year that came out of the Tampa Bay Rays organization. They decided, I think it was June, Pride Month, celebrating the homosexual lifestyle. The Tampa Bay Rays decided to alter their logo with rainbow colors to celebrate Pride Month. There was actually some dispute about that. Some people said, we just want gay people to know they're welcome at the ballpark, which seems kind of odd to me because I think if you pay for a ticket, you are welcome at the ballpark. I think that's pretty simple. But others were saying, no, what it was really about is showing your support for that lifestyle. And 5 players on the Tampa Bay Rays got that. And they said because of their religious convictions, they could not go along with that. And they refused to wear the rainbow logo. And of course, you know the responsive culture to that was, well, you know, everybody has a right to decide for themselves about that, right? Oh, no. Listen, those guys were front page stories all over the country. And people did not say nice things about them. These men are saying that gay people aren't welcome at ball games. These men are espousing hatred for the homosexual community. That's what they got for refusing to wear those colors. It became a national scandal. I wonder if there are some people in the audience that can relate to that. I have some friends who've encountered this problem in the work setting, where they've gotten pressure from the higher ups in the organization to go along with some new policy that's more welcoming to transgender people or more welcoming to the gay and lesbian community. Probably all of us at some point have found ourselves in a conversation where we knew if we said what we believed, we were going to be all by ourselves. And the crowd around us would not approve. And I don't know, brothers and sisters, that that's going to change. I think that's going to get worse and worse as culture decays and becomes less tolerant of the things we believe as disciples. And so, I would just point out that it's one thing to wear the colors in the home stadium. It's one thing to be open about who we are and what we believe in sitting in a room like this. The question is, are we going to wear the colors when we go out there? And I would submit that those who are truly devoted to the cause, that's exactly what they do. Because after all, that is what Jesus called us to be. Think about what is implied when he said, you be lights in darkness. You be a city set on a hill. We're going to be seen. So, my experience at the ballpark made me wonder, am I willing to wear the colors into enemy territory? And I thought about this too. I thought about the fact that true fans invest in their team. True fans invest in their team every way. Now, I discovered about 5 years ago how well I had married. We were coming to the month of May, and I went to my wife and I said, how are we going to celebrate your birthday this year? And this is when I knew I had married very well. My wife said to me, if I could have anything I wanted, I would like for you to take me to an Astros game, and I'd like to sit in the Crawford boxes. And I dropped to my knees and thanked the Lord for my wife. Wow, I have married so well. In fact, I was so happy about that. I said, since it is your birthday, I will do that. Y'all think that's kind of self-serving. Now, don't judge me here. I said, I will take you to the team store, and I will buy you an Altuve jersey. My wife loves Jose Altuve because that's the only professional athlete that she looks eye to eye with. But when we got to the stadium and went in the team store and we started going through the jerseys and looking at the price, my commitment to this plan was tested. I got to tell you, I've never been a team jersey guy. My whole life, whatever I wore with an Astro logo on it was bought off a clearance rack at Walmart, okay? Didn't really care about that. Have you ever bought a team jersey with a player name on it? I looked at the price and I thought, I have already committed to doing this. How can I get out of that? I mean, it is the most expensive shirt that hangs in our closet. You are wondering. Yes, I promised, and so I did. And then I went out into the stadium and I started looking around. And I got to tell you, folks, everybody was wearing one. And my brain started calculating the math of how much money had been spent on all of that. And not just team jerseys. Do you know what it costs to go to a ball game? The cost of the ticket, the cost to park, what you pay for a hot dog? It's a lot of money. And it isn't just money. People who are really invested in their sports team give their time to the team. We don't think a lot about that. I paused, reflecting back on my Saturday night in Game 6 of the World Series, and I thought, how much time did I give to that? I started adding up, kind of had to get ready. You got to drive to the stadium, and you got to find a place to park, and then you go in a little early, right? So you can be there for all the opening activities, and then there's the game, and there's getting 8 hours. I gave 8 hours of my day to that game. And that doesn't count how many times on YouTube. I've got to say this because my wife's watching. I can't tell you how many times we've gone back and watched on YouTube replays of the critical moments of the game. I gave my time to that. And if you're really into it, you give your time to watching ESPN. And you give your time to reading articles and checking on injury reports. And guys that are really invested, they're doing fantasy themes and spending time doing that just right. We put a lot into this. We invest a lot of our time. But listen, that's what fans do. Fans don't invest grudgingly. I didn't drive to Minute Maid Park thinking, what a pain it is. I have to spend all my time driving down there. I didn't think about that. I don't complain about the cost of the jersey. We know we're paying too much for that, but it's a guilty pleasure. We just want it. We can watch the game on TV. It's cheaper. It doesn't take it long, but we want to be there. We want to be there in person. People who are really devoted to the team, they invest in it. It's just getting a little uncomfortable because you know where we're going, right? It nudges me to think about what investment I make in this thing that we do together. I mean, brothers and sisters, this work for the Lord is work that takes time. For example, it will require an investment of our time to reach lost people. You ever thought about that? I have to pay attention. I have to mentally invest in noticing people in my circle who need to know about Jesus and noticing when doors open. And then it takes time to start having conversations with them over lunch that I can't spend talking about what happened in the NCAA tournament over the weekend, right? I'm going to be thinking about how to talk to them about the Lord. And then maybe that's going to be a Bible study at my house. And there may be hours and hours helping this lost person find their way to Jesus and hours spent helping to follow up with all of that. It's just that. Think about the time that is required to do what Galatians 6 teaches us to do. Galatians 6, 1 and 2. Brethren, even if anyone is caught in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one. And so there is an obligation, an investment of time and attention to my fellow disciples so that I notice when someone is struggling spiritually. And then when they are, there's an investment of time to go and talk to them and try to rescue them. And that may take hours and hours of talking and pleading and teaching to get that to happen. There are classes that have to be taught. Somebody's got to host devos for these young people. There are sick people that need food brought to them. Folks in the hospital who need to be visited. These men have done such an excellent job leading us in public worship today. But they had to invest their time in preparing to get up and lead us today. And listen, there's a need for money. Can we just say it that plainly? The work of spreading the gospel requires financial resources to support laborers here, to support laborers throughout the world. And it is God's plan that we participate in that. Look at this text in 2 Corinthians. I'm going to 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Will you look there with me? 2 Corinthians chapter 8. I really like this. Verse 1, Paul says, now, brethren, we wish to make known to you the grace of God which has been given in the churches of Macedonia, that in a great ordeal of affliction, their abundance of joy and their deep poverty overflowed in the wealth of the liberality. For I testify that according to their ability and beyond their ability, they gave of their own accord, begging us with much urging for the favor of participation in the support of the saints. And this, not as we expected, but they first gave themselves to the Lord and to us by the will of God. Notice that these disciples were making a financial investment beyond their ability to support the work of spreading the gospel. But it wasn't grudgingly. It wasn't like some sort of spiritual tax they were required to pay. Notice verse 4 says that they were begging. We want to be part of this. Begging for listen to this, the favor of participation. They were thrilled that there was a way for them to be involved. And listen, verse 5 tells us the reason that's so. They first gave themselves to the Lord. These people were on the team. They were devoted to the team. And so this wasn't grudging giving. They were thrilled to get to be part. So, as I've thought about the investment I make from March through October to the Houston Astros, it stirred me to think about the investment that I make to this. It ain't just about baseball, folks. And even just about sports. Think about whatever your passion is and what you put into it. And how does that compare with what we put into this, which we all agree is the most important work that's happening on the planet? May I suggest we believe that is so, our investment ought to match the value we attach to the Word. Y'all with me on that? We together? Let's think about our investment. Lastly, let's think about our passion. Because I will tell you, people at Minute Maid Park, at the end of Game 6 of World Series, most people were excited. The passion level was extraordinarily high. I already told you, man, the roof was just raised by the noise of the crowd. And people were not anxious to run right out. I mean, they were hanging around. They wanted to hear the speeches. They wanted to see the trophy. And even when it was over, everybody poured out into the streets. They were celebrating. And we've all had the opposite experience too. Are there basketball fans in the crowd? Some of you watching the tournament? I mention that because my brother-in-law, I was with my brother-in-law Friday night, and he is a Purdue Boilermaker fan. Yeah. Nobody was raising the roof at his house Friday night. In fact, we were all just real quiet. That Phillies fan behind me did not go home happy. In fact, I was going to shake his hand, and I turned around. He was already gone, man. He got out of there fast. But I didn't feel badly for him. Because a year before, I had also been at Game 6 of the World Series as those Atlanta Braves, those nasty Atlanta Braves, knocked my team off, and I went home disappointed, right? It may be one of the indicators that we care too much about this stuff, when it is able to stir our passions so powerfully. Have you ever had a hard time sleeping after your team lost a really, really tough game? That may be a sign we care too much. Here's the tougher question. Does this stuff stir my passion? I worked with a church that had this telephone system where you could record a message and it would automatically call every member and deliver the message. And so one of our deacons took it upon himself, every time there was a baptism, he would record a message about it and send it out to everybody. I can't think of a better thing to share, can you? And something that ought to more stir our excitement than when a new disciple has been born again, right? And yet I heard some disciples in our church family complain, man, I get tired of getting those calls. I mean, it's like all the time I'm getting a call about someone's baptism. And I'm thinking, that's a bad thing? You don't want to hear the news and join heaven's celebration? It's inconvenienced by the phone call. That stir our excitement. Or when someone comes forward and the announcement is made, his brother's decided to be born again, do we think, oh man, that's going to be 10 more minutes? Or the opposite. When someone in your circle begins to show those signs that they are drifting, and when you know people, you can pick up on it, does that stir our concern? I think about something that Paul wrote. It's always made a real powerful impression on me. It's also in 2 Corinthians, just a little further, chapter 11. He's writing this list of all these things that were burdens to him as a preacher. It's so interesting to me. I mean, in a context where he's talking about beatings and shipwrecks and things like that. In verse 28, this is 2 Corinthians 11, verse 28, he says, apart from such external things, there is daily pressure on me of concern for all the churches. Who is weak without my being weak? And who is led into sin without my intense concern? I have really thought about those words. And all the disciples that Paul knew, all the people he had baptized, and all the churches all over the world that he had helped establish or been connected with. And he says, what I feel is a daily burden because I worry about my brethren. And I am fearful, brothers and sisters, that sometimes we are more emotionally disturbed by a key player's injury on our favorite team than we are some disciple who's showing signs of drifting away. I really mattered to Paul. And I think about this thing that we're doing this morning, and I wonder about the capacity of worship to stir our passion. Do we just come and sort of go through the obligatory exercises on a Sunday, or do we long for being together with the whole team, bringing this to God? Is there an excitement? Listen, when your mind broke consciousness this morning and you realize it's Sunday, it usually takes me up 1 cup of coffee to figure that out, but it's Sunday and we're going to be coming together and we're going to sing. Listen, when it was announced we were going to sing Behold Our God, I nearly yelled out loud. I just had to hold it back. I love that song. I think every church service ought to begin with that song. It really stirs me up. You got songs like that stir you up? Is getting this book open and wading into it, does that stir you up and get you excited? Let me ask you about this. How about extra innings? So in the third game of the Seattle series, I know you're thinking, this guy knows way too much about baseball. I do. So I'm preaching to myself this morning. In the third game of the Seattle series, the first playoff series for Houston, the game went 18 innings. That's like 2 whole games for the price of 1 ticket. You know, I didn't hear any fans saying, listen, I was really unhappy that this game wasn't done by the 9th inning. I only planned to be there for 9 innings, 3-4 hours tops. This went way too long. I've never heard a football fan say, you know, we went into overtime. And I was just so put out that I had to wait for the game to be over. Overtime, that makes the game even better. Extra innings, I'm just getting a bonus. Worship, boy, doesn't it tell something about us? Someone, you said you're the most surf-serving preacher I've ever seen, setting up from overtime. I don't plan to do overtime this week, okay? But isn't it odd that it's a bad thing if we do? It makes me wonder about our passion, about this thing we do together. So, as I have reflected on my passion for my baseball team, and I will tell you, the last 7 or 8 years, it's been great to be a Houston Astros fan. It has nudged me to think about all of this thing that we do together, and my investment in it, and my passion for it. Not trying to make you feel bad about whatever else it is in this life that stirs your excitement. But I am trying to remind us in the big picture what it is that really matters. And it's not the outcome of an NCAA championship game, and it's not the outcome of the Super Bowl or the World Series. Brothers and sisters, the most important work happening on the planet is the one you and I have the privilege of sharing in. Doesn't matter if it makes the headlines, because it is the work that God sees and cares about. Let's give our passion. Let's make our investment in that. Maybe there's somebody here today and you're saying to yourself, you know, I'm just not there. In fact, let's be honest. Maybe there's somebody that's sitting in the crowd this morning that if you had to be honest, you'd said, I'm here because I want to keep the elders off my back. I'm here because for my whole life, it's what my family has always done. I'm just going through the routine, going through the motion. And the bad thing about being in that place is that there is something deep inside every one of us that says, I know that is not enough. We know the inadequacy of just going through the routine, of just showing up and being present. And I think within us there's a longing for it to be more than that. Here's the good news. It can be. We can get to the place that Paul was at in Philippians 1 when he said, for to me to live is Christ. We can be there too. It begins maybe with a decision you'll make today to say, I'm tired of going through the motions. I want to be the real deal. I want to be an authentic